Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. It's Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 9th of January 2025. I'm sniggering because this is the 6th time I tried to start this video and I can't get my words out. Oh my goodness. Right, okay, we're going to start with Ramstein. So the Ramstein meeting is taking place at Ramstein in Germany in person. It's the first time this has happened for 4 months, I believe. The one was cancelled before because of the hurricane that didn't allow US President Biden to attend. It was supposed to be a heads of state one, so that's now been cancelled and replaced with this much later one. In fact, the last one before Biden shuffles on to a retirement, and he wasn't there. So this is Zelensky is there, but otherwise it's, I think, the military leaders from these different countries. So at this meeting, partners have agreed on plans to support Ukraine through 2027. The allies fulfilling their commitments of July the 12th, 2024, have agreed on 8 roadmaps to develop Ukraine's defense capabilities through 2027. Partner countries, says Max24, plan to work closely with Ukraine to assist not only in wartime, but also after it. This includes donations, procurement, investments, and efforts to expand the industrial base, including by attracting domestic production and supporting capabilities for Ukraine's defense industry. Some more details coming out from what has been said. Kyiv Independent reports Zelensky as saying it would be crazy to drop the ball now, urging continued support. Addressing the Ramstein group in Germany today, Zelensky urged his allies to continue working together to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression. Quote, "We've come such a long way that it would honestly be crazy to drop the ball now and not keep building on the defense coalitions we've created." And that's absolutely correct. So for almost 3 years of full-scale war, he says, we have shown that no one is too small to make an impact on history. And that is, of course, well, not of course, possibly with relation to Ukraine being small comparatively to some countries, but also Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Denmark, all these smaller countries compared to, say, France, Germany, and the US coming together to really help Ukraine. I am doing everything I can to end this war with dignity for Ukraine and Europe. What else? So Anton Gerashenko says Zelensky, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and military representatives from more than 50 countries are in attendance. One of the main topics on the agenda is strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities over the next 2 years to maintain credible deterrence. Roadmaps detailing Ukraine's needs and goals in air force, armor, artillery, demining, drones, air and missile defense, information technology and maritime security will be approved. Zelensky gave a statement at the meeting about the cooperation of Ukraine with allies and the current state of affairs on the battlefield. He once again emphasized that, quote, stopping the cash flow for Putin's war effort through sanctions is crucial to stop the killing. So sanctions are so super important. In fact, there is a news that, and Andriy Yermak has made a hint today that there are some big things coming in terms of sanctions, and I think that's from America. So watch out for that. Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin announced the last package of military assistance for Ukraine. We'll talk about that in a second. First of all, Zelensky's also said this: the deployment of military contingents of partners on the territory of Ukraine, so in other words, foreign troops, foreign trainers, is one of the best tools to bring peace closer. Let's be more practical to make this possible. So there's added pressure from Zelensky to get foreign troops inside Ukraine. Indeed, he says Putin wants to completely destroy Ukraine. Our goal is to find tools to prevent this from happening. One of these tools is the deployment of partner contingents in Ukraine. We have already heard signals from some countries that support us in this. The UK. Interesting. So the UK might be at the forefront of troops being in Ukraine. We've generally been supportive of this. Every time it's come up, Macron's brought this up. France has been on board. Other countries, smaller countries, have been on board, such as the Baltics, possibly some of the Nordics. Germany has not been on board. American neither. And the UK, I think, has broadly been in support. And lo and behold, Zelensky picks us out as being signalling at least support for that kind of mission. I don't know whether it's training, whether it's for peacekeepers, whether it's etc. etc. Biden, okay, so this is moving on to that aid package, has approved the latest package worth $500 million. We were hearing this was going to be a big one. $500 million is, comparatively speaking, not that big. It's bigger than the $250 million ones that we were seeing kind of around the time of the 7-month hiatus. But we were expecting, well, I was expecting, they were saying, look, there's $3.8 billion left in PDA. This last one, before Trump takes over, is going to be a big one. I was expecting $2 billion, maybe more. 500 million, I am a little bit underwhelmed by. It could be that the Americans just don't have that kit in their stockpiles that they need, that they want to send to Ukraine. I have yet to see big packages of armor. We know there are Strikers and Bradleys on the way. They're being refurbished and done up, but I was expecting more to be pledged so that they could be given at a future point. So this package includes missiles for Ukraine's air defense, shells, air-to-ground missiles, and equipment to support Ukrainian F-16s. So that's that final one. It does obviously leave an awful lot from the $3.8 billion of PDA program remaining. So approximately $3.8 billion from the PDA program will remain. So actually that was, therefore, you would assume $4.3 billion they had left. So 3.8 remains unused to pass on to the Trump administration. So if Trump is up for continuing to give aid to Ukraine, then this isn't too much of a problem. But many of us are thinking, well, we don't really know what Trump is going to do. I was last night, I couldn't get to sleep. I was partly because I did a video so late, and it was a long one, and my brain was firing. But I was gaming all the situations, and I might do a video. In fact, I will do a video on this where I want to look at all the realities on the ground of what or in the White House of what Trump may do. The problem is Trump keeps saying things that make you think he's completely going to do something else, like i.e. not help Ukraine. Everything he's doing is sharing on the internet. And what he's doing, having his son do, and his son then sharing something today about why the hell have we been giving Ukraine fire equipment when the fires in Los Angeles are roaring? You know, fire hydrants have run out of water and all this kind of stuff. A lot of disinformation around that fire. And in fact, Russia's picked up on this as well. Maria, the Minister of Foreign Affairs spokeswoman, Masharova, is it? She has come out and said, Maria Zakharova, isn't it? Has come out and said exactly, kind of reiterating what Donald Trump Jr. and others have been saying. In other words, you know, if you're the president's son and you're saying stuff that the spokesperson for the Kremlin, or at least from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is going to be saying, then you're probably saying the wrong thing. So when you've got your son and people around you talking in terms of denigration of Ukraine, then you're thinking, well, Donald Trump is likely not to support Ukraine. And when you see his envoy, Keith Kellogg, cancel his trip to Ukraine, and then saying we're going to get it wrapped up quickly. Trump wants to do this as quickly as possible. It doesn't say he wants to. Like, if you ask me how I'd want this war to end, right? If I was in charge of trying to sort the ending to this war out, my first objective would be that it ends justly for Ukraine. Not as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible says nothing about how well you do it. Like, I want you to do this painting. Okay, can you do it as quickly as possible? No, I don't really care what it looks like. The first thing is you do this in 5 minutes. Oh, you've given me a really crap painting. Yeah, because my objective was you do it as quickly as possible. Okay, we haven't got time. Okay, you don't want more people to die. But actually, they're dying for something, and it's not just for shits and giggles. They want democracy, they want sovereignty, they want their freedom. Okay, so how do we go about solving this war so that they have their territorial integrity, so they're getting a just peace, so they're getting as much as they can possibly hope for? That's what the objectives should be. So when you start seeing what people like Keith Kellogg is saying, even though they're supportive of Ukraine generally, Keith Kellogg, they're not saying the right thing. Words are important, right? And when you hear Trump saying these things, etc., etc., so you're thinking, well, the likelihood of the remaining $3.8 billion of aid going to Ukraine is well, it's pretty low because of what we're hearing him say. But then this could be just bluster, and I don't know. There are if you kind of war game this, there are scenarios where he could end up doing loads for Ukraine. But then you're thinking, why are you saying all this? This isn't clever. You know, double bluffing the enemy and whatnot. This is just you on Twitter sounding off and your son sounding off. He's not playing 4D chess. Donald Trump Jr., the only time he'd play 4D chess if the chessboard was lined with cocaine. So, like, you know, we need to be realistic about what's being said and what's likely to happen going forward. And I don't know. I'm not, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't be putting good money on Ukraine receiving that $3.8 billion that remains in quick time. But it may happen. You never know. Trump is just, I don't know, he's all over the shop. And the problem is, he's also giving rhetoric to do with Greenland and Panama that it doesn't really look good for supporting Ukraine. That kind of rhetoric is actually imperial rhetoric, similar to what we hear coming out of the Kremlin. Shashin Joshi from The Economist says, in this week's Economist, my colleagues and I look at what sort of Ukraine deal Trump wants and how he might pursue it and what he wants of European allies. Trump is still, quote, playing with ideas and, quote, looking for input from Europeans, one diplomat told me. So we might still be in this situation where Trump hasn't been that clear and explicit on Ukraine recently. Other people have been sounding off, but Trump's actually not said an awful lot. And it could be because he still doesn't quite know what to do. So we've heard Keith Kellogg say it's now going to take 100 days. This idea that actually 6 months was something that Trump said, which is like, it's not going to be solved in 24 hours. And Trump doesn't quite know what to do. And these things are more complicated than they originally thought, you know, and all the issues with that. So the alternative is, if you don't help Ukraine, well, actually, how much is that going to cost you? If cost is a big thing for you, Trump, and the incoming administration, then actually the American Enterprise Institute, which is a free market right-wing think tank, but one that's unlike the Heritage Tank that doesn't support Ukraine, that does support Russia. The AEI, I'm not a big fan of the AEI at all, but they do support Ukraine quite strongly. They've got a few people who write for them and think for them, who are very knowledgeable on Ukraine. So far from saving money on US weapons that are being provided to Ukraine, a Russian victory in the war would require a surge in Pentagon spending of $808 billion. So that's almost the entire DoD budget being spent because Ukraine loses a war. That's through 2029, according to an analysis by the AEI. So bear in mind, the AEI is supportive of Ukraine, caveats apply, etc., etc. But one analysis is that actually, you want to be spending the money now so you don't spend more later. And that's long been an argument that's been touted. Now, this $500 million package includes AIM-7, RIM-7, and AIM-9M missiles for air defense. Some of those will be surface-to-air missiles that are air-to-air missiles used in surface-to-air way, and also air-to-air missiles as well. So I presume anyway. Air-to-ground munitions too. Don't know what they might be. Could be JDAMs. Could be cruise missiles. I don't know. Support equipment for F-16s. Armoured bridging systems. In fact, Jeff 2146 has updated his list with 2 M60 armoured vehicle launched bridges. So he somehow knows exactly how many they're getting. So 2 of those bridging systems. Secure comms equipment, small arms and ammunition, spare parts, ancillary equipment, services, training and transportation. So that is what the Americans are giving. And apparently, Pentagon's senior defense official has said that the vast majority of defense supplies promised through the PDA, Pentagon stocks, will be delivered to Ukraine this month. So actually, most of what is pledged will be delivered before one assumes Trump takes over. So not too long left there, but I guess that's good news for Ukraine. So to date, says OSINT defender, quoting Sabrina Singh from the Pentagon, to date, the US and our allies and partners have collectively committed more than $126 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. This is interesting because that money is less than what other people are saying America has done on their own. So if this is the official Pentagon line, then what does that say about the line that we hear from others that the US has committed 177 billion or similar, 175 billion we hear. Here we've got the Pentagon saying that the US and allies and partners have committed 126 billion together. So there's a difference of numbers there. Now, Shashank Joshi gives a revealing chart here. The UK was included. It's EU 27 in this chart only. Then it'll be sat comfortably above the line, Shashank Joshi. So what lines are you talking about? So these charts show you how far away countries are from Moscow, being seen as, I guess, the enemy. These are the 27 EU countries, so it doesn't include Norway, it doesn't include UK. But how far they are away from Moscow and how much their defence spending is as a percentage of GDP. So Greece is quite far from Moscow, kind of in the middle. Yeah, Portugal's much further away. Greece spends quite a lot of its of budget on defence because it's consistently engaged with Turkey over Cyprus, etc., etc. And that's why it was one of the original people that spent over 2% of GDP on defence. So they spend almost 3%, and you've got Poland, relatively close to Moscow, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all up there, spending a good deal of their budget on defence. Finland and Sweden, fairly close, spending less, but they've got bigger budgets. And then you've got Netherlands, interestingly. They've supported Ukraine a lot, but in terms of overall defence spending, they're quite far down. And everyone sort of all over the shop around there. But then when you look at how far these countries are from Moscow and how much military aid they're giving to Ukraine as a percentage of GDP, you have certain countries like Spain giving very little, and I presume is that Portugal over there, giving very little, but also quite far away from Moscow, so they don't have that geographical urgency. And then a lot of countries really not spending more than, not spending enough, as according to this kind of red dotted line there. Even Germany spending, but then they've got a much larger economy, right? They do spend a lot on defence, as you can see there. It's above the kind of mean line, I guess that is, but here it's below. I don't know if that's a mean average. But here Germany is interestingly below, so they're spending an awful lot. They're the second biggest spenders on Ukraine, but this chart has them right down there. Estonia, Denmark right up there with Estonia. You've got Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden then coming up with the goods, and Finland almost likewise. Poland actually quite far behind, even though initially they gave an awful lot. So maybe Donald Tusk's government need to pull their finger out. And then other countries as well. Italy has been criticised quite a lot. France here too as well, not spending enough on support for Ukraine, even though they do spend a fair amount on their defence, so almost 2% there. So interesting stats going on in those graphs. Right, Germany, according to Politico, EU reporter Rixa Fürsen, Germany will also announce a further military assistance package to Ukraine today at the Ramstein meeting. Haven't heard it, but she's generally quite accurate. So there's a good chance that additional aid from Germany will actually be announced. German aid for Ukraine will keep us up to date. Now, there is a bit of news. There was this one Lynx that's been given, an infantry fighting vehicle from Rheinmetall will be given to Ukraine. Apparently 10 are on the way, so another 9 will be delivered this year. Rheinmetall spokesperson told me today, says German aid to Ukraine, that the Lynx IFV's delivery to Ukraine was not financed by Rheinmetall itself. This leaves the German government or the Ukrainian government as the most likely candidates. Be interesting to see how much these things cost. The no news on the factory there. I mean, it doesn't seem to be happening, does it, at the moment? 10 in total. 1 was delivered last year. The rest will follow this year. First step to a bigger contract. Doubt someone is willing to put €1 billion or more into the construction of a production plant in Ukraine so they can produce an IFV for Ukraine where no one tested it under real conditions in Ukraine. So I guess they want to test these 10 IFVs out, see if they're worth the money, and then build a factory if they are. Right, Anthony Blinken has said, and this I probably should have had this earlier, sorry, when talking about what's Trump going to do. You've got $3.8 billion of PDA left over. He has said, Anthony Blinken, the outgoing Secretary of State, Biden administration invites France to take a leading role in ensuring Ukraine's military needs are met in the coming months. Wow. Is that an admission that actually they don't think the money's going to come from the US? that someone else needs to pick up the lead on supporting Ukraine. We go back to this chart. France spends quite a bit on defense, but actually they are underspending. Are they the right people to lead support for Ukraine arms deliveries? I know that your man Emmanuel Macron is pretty strong in his support for Ukraine, but he's got a really testy government situation at the moment, has had for some time, and there are kind of split objectives, I guess, and agendas from those in the National Assembly there. The UK Ministry of Defence has announced a Project Cookson Challenge session. The event invites industry partners from NATO, Ukraine, and Five Eyes, so that's Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, and the US, countries to shape the development of a versatile, fast, and low observable maritime system designed for operations in Ukraine and beyond. They've done this before, put out like not quite a tender, but ask companies to go and research this kind of weapon and get us something that's, reasonable in terms of cost and does X, Y, and Z. And here it looks like they're doing that again in the context of a maritime weapons system. Euromaidan Press is reporting what happens when your smartest weapons suddenly aren't so smart. Russia's electronic warfare revolution in Ukraine tells a stark story in numbers. Western precision munitions that once hit 95% of targets now strike only 6%. HIMARS systems that changed the war's early dynamics now operate at 40%. That's an incredible change of accuracy. Now, we had heard this previously, that 6% from 95%, I think was referring to, was that JDAMs? Or it might be the Excalibur. I think it might be the Excalibur round. Now, whether they've adapted some of these and brought them back into the battlefield arena with upgraded, more resilient to electronic warfare systems on, I don't know. Whether this is still the case, I'm not sure, but there's just a massive drop in the accuracy of these systems. Effectiveness, so that is the HIMARS system now operates for 40% effectiveness against Russian countermeasures. Quote, Ukraine receives what it needs to fight, but not what it needs to win, Colonel Reisner reveals as Russia deploys 640,000 troops and fires 90,000 artillery rounds daily, more than 4 times Ukraine's capacity. Now, interesting stats being claimed there. 640,000 troops, I think, is something to raise your eyebrows over. Is that accurate? 90,000 artillery rounds daily does seem to be, as a claim, pretty incredible, because they were talking about 40 to 60,000 at the height of the war, and now they're running low of, or they are using what they can produce and what they can get off North Korea. So I don't know that 90,000 is accurate, unless it includes mortar rounds, unless it includes, I don't know. Anyway, the general point is that weaponry is becoming less and less precise, or at least the Russians are fighting with successful electronic warfare very often, and that means things like HIMARS and ATACMS. You had to fire way more than you need in order that some of them do get through and succeed in hitting their targets. Ukraine's parliament has passed a historic citizenship law for defence forces and their families. This initiative is specifically designed to address the needs of foreign volunteers fighting for Ukraine and their families. That is good news, and it will make it easier for people to come and volunteer to fight for Ukraine and not be treated, still be allowed to be paid and so on and so forth. So, if they can get citizenship then more easily, then that allows them to integrate better, and also to be able to, it's more attractive for them to come and fight for Ukraine. And importantly, a new law has been passed in Ukraine making military training mandatory for all men aged 18 to 25. So that's the cohort that at the moment is not being mobilised. This is military training, it's not mobilisation. A year of service can be any time until they're 24. So this looks like a kind of a national conscription. For women, training will be voluntary. Lawmakers insist the mobilisation age remains at 25 and women will not be mobilised, but this looks like a bit of a stopgap. Does the draft law provide for the mobilization of citizens from the age of 18? No, mobilization will not be reduced to 18. What types of military training for citizens does the bill envisage? The bill provides for two types of military training for, let's have a look, for men, basic military training and basic military service. What's the difference between training and service? Basic military training, starting in 2025, is conducted during studies at a higher educational institution, and the term of study will be determined by separate resolution of the Cabinet and Ministers of Ukraine. The following citizens are exempted from basic military training in institutions of higher education or of all forms of ownership, military service due to their health, countries who completed military service in other countries before acquiring Ukrainian citizenship, and who have already done military service. Basic military service is introduced instead of conscription and is available to those who are not studying at a university. So basically, it's just, we want people to still study, but they can do this kind of training while they are studying. Otherwise, you have to do military service. What is a planned mobilization age? Draft law proposes mobilization from 25 to 60 years, so that seems to stay the same. Should men who have reached the age of 18 do basic military service? Starting the age of 18, every man must complete basic military service, choosing the time of the passage independently, but before reaching the age of 25. Citizens who have completed basic military training in higher education institutions will not be involved in this type of military service. How long will basic military service last? Term of basic military service in peacetime will be 5 months, in wartime 3 months. And can citizens from the age of 18 who have completed or not completed basic military service or basic military training be mobilized? For this category of citizens, a delay will be provided until they reach the mobilization age. So I presume it means that no, they could, even if you've done the training, it doesn't mean that you're more likely to be mobilized, or at least you're not going to be mobilized before the age of 25. But I guess it's a way of making sure that once you do reach mobilization age, then actually you don't then have to go and do another X amount of months of training, that it kind of speeds things up a little bit, makes it a bit more efficient, or I presume it's trying to achieve something like that. No report says Russia has begun forced conscription of their own in the occupied regions of Kherson and Zaporizhia. According to Ukrainian intelligence, for the first time, Russian authorities have conducted conscription among the local populations there. Approximately 300 people have been drafted into the military. So it's, take control of these places and then force the people that now are still living there, that haven't had a chance to run away, force them into the military to fight against their own countrymen. It's horrible, isn't it? Now, that's all I have on Russia. We've got a couple of things that are worth mentioning here. First of all, you're going to see this quite a lot, and it's really depressing. Really good video with Ian Hislop on LBC talking about Elon Musk. Really, really spot on analysis of Musk. But Musk talking about, but what about California, in answer to this idea that Joe Biden's US aid has funded 16 Ukrainian fire departments with protective gear, motor pumps, chainsaws, rescue motor cutters, rechargeable spotlights, fire extinguishers, and hydraulic rescue tools. So he's picked this out from the 8th, and so, but what about California? So you've got Elon Musk, richest man in the world, that could probably bloody fund that himself, right? Having a go at the US for providing assistance to Ukraine in terms of fire protection. Now, the fire departments in Los Angeles, these big fires at the moment, are they wildfires? Are they on purpose? There were claims of people in ski masks going around lighting stuff. A huge gusts of wind. It's really hurricane kind of winds that have been blowing these embers all over the place, and there are huge fires. As I mentioned in my previous video, I know someone who's lost their entire house at the age of 74. The great Eddie Tabash, a lawyer, he was fought tirelessly for the non-religious in the US. He's a great guy, absolutely great guy. He sent an email saying he's age of 74, he's lost everything, which is like deeply depressing. But it's not a zero-sum game here. The fire departments have the equipment. What they don't have is enough water, because California, and apparently, although there's lots of disinformation, the reservoirs were at the level they needed to be. It's just that they've had to use it all up. this has been absolutely horrific there, the fires. But you've got people like Donald Trump Jr. spouting off about why are we giving all this to Ukraine when we should be, and it's typical. And all it is who was it today that said, someone like Pekka Kallianiemi, it wasn't, it was someone else like that, saying, why is it that it's Ukraine's fault for everything? Just blame Ukraine for everything. And that's where we're at in the US to some degree. It's so divisive, the Ukraine has become so partisan. Anything that goes wrong, that's because we gave some old fire engines to Ukraine. Oh, that's because Ukraine. That's because Ukraine. Elon Musk really does need to just go and disappear. Go and fly himself to I don't know, Mars on a one-way trip. See ya. Go and terraform Mars on your own. I'll give you a spade. So depressing. Right, Shashan. Joshi then says, what is easily lost is that... I just want to... In the context of military aid and gearing up for all eventualities and having the right things in the right places, etc., etc. What Trump is saying about Greenland isn't without strategic merit, all other things remaining equal. Like, if you're just... Okay, if the US had Greenland, that would be useful because natural resources and place to put military bases and etc, etc, etc. Except they don't have Greenland, right? And so how do you best go about doing Greenland, right? If you want Greenland, and he's just gone in and threatened Denmark with military action. Basically, it was one of the options. So it's like, it's probably not the way to go about it. It's an interesting idea that actually there's only 57,000 people live there. If you made them all millionaires, it's a super cheap way of self determination. You say, okay, it's up to the Greenlanders. Okay, we gave you $1 billion each. It made you all billionaires. 57 billion. No, 57,000 billion. So I don't know, whatever that is. But you can keep it, actually 57, if you made them all millionaires, then that would be 57 billion, wouldn't it? So which is like cheap as chips. I mean, goodness me, 500 billion is cheap as chips. So, you could make them all millionaires and that's the way to do it. But he's gone in and threatened like military action. But what's easily lost is that Denmark, Greenland, and Europe would welcome this regardless of who owns it, i.e., quote, Greenlandic officials say there have been discussions about building up the US military presence on the Arctic island, possibly through a second base. So it's like you can still build that stuff without having to own it. I'm sure Greenland will welcome that investment in there. And actually, Europe would welcome that. But this is all about defending against who? Well, Russia. If the Arctic ice melts, then you're going to get Russian shipping freely passing across there, maybe. So you're protecting from Russia. Well, do you know what? Make Ukraine win the war against Russia. That's what you need to do. Provide Ukraine all the weapons they need rather than worrying about buying Iceland or invading Iceland and essentially invading Europe via a Danish dependency. So just absolute insanity going on at the moment. I think in a way that, I don't go to my next door neighbour. I don't go to Doris and say, do you know what? I really like your garden. If you don't give me your garden, I'm going to smash your house in. Right? That's kind of like, that's my military action. As a way of me then, eventually, she ends up conceding like her greenhouse to me. Right? I say, well, I got that because I was all brash and threatened her with military action. Is that right? Is that morally right to do that? Is the first thing. And can you do these things in another way? Great example. My actual real neighbour, she's not called Doris. I use her greenhouse. She's too old to use it. And when John, before he died, was too old to use it, I was like, all right if I grow tomatoes in there. So I, being nice to my neighbours, I used to mow their lawn when I was more mobile. I'd always mow their lawns and I'd use their greenhouse, and they let me use their greenhouse, and they do every year. So I don't need to threaten her. I don't need to threaten Doris with smashing her house in order to get part of the garden type thing. Like, there are ways around this. You can be nice to them. You can offer them stuff. This can be working together collaboratively in order that I get to have the use of a greenhouse without smashing a house in. So, you can get use of Greenland and access to Greenland without threatening military action or without, threatening an ally. So it's just the way you go about doing things. It's not to say that having ideas about strategic utility of Greenland is off the cards. You can't ever think about that. You know, we are leasing back the Chagos Islands that we were. All the international agencies were saying the UK was illegally controlling or owning or whatever, and Labour government has just, some people think this is absolutely terrible, but they've kind of agreed with international law, giving it back. But then we're going to lease it, and it's going to cost us X amount a year to lease, and that's one way around it. Like, that's adhering to kind of international law, but we seem to do things by international law. America is just like, yeah, whatever. We're going to beat you up unless you do this. Oh, is that what Russia did? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, point being that there is a lot of interest in militarizing the island, as well as and even space bases, but also there is a lot of interest in the natural resources, that as the ice melts with global warming, you will get access to a lot more of those natural resources much more easily. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for watching. Please take care. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.